Hey everyone, this is Sina with another episode of Into the Bytecode. My guest today is Jonny Mack, the co-founder of Hypersub. I've known Jonny since 2017 when we worked on some early product experiments together, and it was a lot of fun to record this conversation. So some of the ideas we talked about are how one of crypto's superpowers is bringing groups of people together with shared ownership and shared upside. We talked about the computer and the casino and how there can be a synthesis of the two of them. And we talked about what it means to be a crypto native creator and how a big part of that is driving value to the audience. I thought there were a lot of interesting ideas here, and I hope you enjoy.
I think from a values perspective, I'm a very independent person, and I think I've always, one of the like jokes that I like to, self-deprecating jokes I like to make is that I am a founder just because I'm too much of a punk ass to work at a company. Like I don't like being told what to do. I never have. I grew up, listening to punk and hardcore and skateboarding, and I've always been kind of anti-authority, and I can armchair analyze myself. Maybe it's because I grew up with a single mom. Maybe it's because I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's just always appealed to me, this idea that you could, just this DIY culture, you could build parallel systems rather than just complaining about things. You could build better alternatives. And to me, there's a lot that's broken. I like living through the financial crisis of 2008, like seeing friends and family have their wealth completely wiped out. The more that you look into, financial institutions and branches of government, the more it just looks like a giant fraud, at least to me. And so rather than complaining about it, I'm very inspired by the idea that you could just build something different. You could build something better. And so I think that's probably what is at the core of my interest in crypto from the very beginning, as well as like through to today. Like if you look at banking, if you look at the credit card networks, if you look at the way that, major institutions operate, I think it's unfair. Like the idea that the federal government cannot account for billions and billions of dollars that have been spent, and yet I have to declare any more than $400 that I share, like in Venmo or receive in Venmo. Like that's, to me, just, it's completely absurd. So I'm inspired by the idea of just building something better, rather than complaining, rather than crying about the way that it is, just do it yourself, build better alternative. So that was the beginning. And I think it took me a number of years to develop conviction on what that should be and what that should look like. And I mean, you and I have known each other actually throughout that journey. We've worked on different projects, we've collaborated, and you've seen me, I think probably more so than anybody else in our industry, go through those growing pains and feeling like, okay, there's something here, trying to scratch on something. Is it, initially I was like really interested in human readable names for addresses. So I was like playing a lot around with ENS stuff. And then I was really interested in DAOs and community things. And
maybe a fun short tangent is that I think I bought my main ENS name using Jonny's product.
Yeah,
I think
radical address.
ETH was initially registered through you.
I love that. I mean, one of the design principles of radical address, and is actually the same for the things that we build with Fabric now, which is that the gold standard of a crypto product is that the company that built it could go out of business, and there would be perfect continuity of service for the end user. They would never know the difference. And so it's a feather in my cap that you bought your name through radical address. Radical address died, and yet you never noticed. I think this is the power of building protocols. And another thing of, I think, like having lived through the era of MySpace and Facebook and networks that kind of own and and mediate all these social relationships, I think that's another facet to crypto that I find fascinating and inspiring, that you can kind of emancipate yourself from these middlemen. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I could ramble on and on, but I think these are the core ideas around like what has kept me interested throughout the ups and downs.
Yeah. So yeah, you were working on radical address, and then you went deep on DAOs. And what has been the kind of like arc of the journey you've been on? And what have been your kind of, if you were to look underneath each of these chapters and like what worked, what didn't work, what did you really kind of like distill and synthesize and take away with you that has found its way into what you're doing now? What would you say those things are?
I think that the central idea is pooled capital in order to achieve a shared goal and to share in the upside. That's the central idea that's run through, I think, everything that Fabric has been around about from day one. And so how we achieve that outcome has changed and like I think, and matured. But that's the basic idea. So early on, I think with all of the exuberance around DAOs in the last cycle, I think that there was a lot of confusion and like cloudiness around like what is happening here. Everyone, I think, genuinely believed like, okay, there's something here, but what is that thing? And I think there's a lot of these kind of tangents which were around governance or decision making. And when I really think about the phenomenon of DAOs, I actually see a parallel with like meme coins and with like Wall Street bets and GameStop and that whole phenomenon, which is like this idea that everyone that people can find each other on the internet, they have shared interests and they can take independent action, but that the combination of those independent actions, there's like this emergent phenomenon, and that is very powerful. So like stepping back, if you think about it, like in a capitalist society, like capital is leverage, capital is power. You can do things when you have a lot of money. And most people in society, by that definition, are actually very, very low leverage. Like I'm not independently wealthy. Most people are not. And so we're all these like low leverage individual participants in the economy. But when you can coordinate our efforts together, there's this emergent property, which is high leverage. So one thing I like to say is a small amount of money from a lot of people is a lot of money, and a lot of money is a lot of leverage. And so I think that's always just been like very fascinating to me. And I think you've seen these kind of murmurations or like these mimetic waves play out in and out of crypto. But I think crypto is actually uniquely enabled to orchestrate and facilitate those kinds of movements. And I think those are the kind of movements that need to happen in order to create change in the world. And so that's like the core idea, I think, of what we're trying to do is help people find each other, you know, who share the same goals and who want to pool resources and coordinate their energies together to achieve a shared goal. But then it doesn't end there. It's that they can share in the upside. So how we do that, I think the form that has taken is changed over time. But that's like the beating heart of what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the first time we talked about this idea, it immediately hit me how kind of powerful it was. And I think we were also talking about this lens of the computer versus the casino, right?
Yes.
And how there, maybe you can talk about what that means, because I feel like you've spent a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, just the idea there, it's a riff off of something that Chris Dixon said, you know, which is like, is crypto the computer or is it the casino? And if you think about the EVM, the way I think about the EVM is that it is a global computer that anybody in the world can pay to use. So the EVM is comprised of nodes, right, running the state of the chain at any given moment, and anyone can pay to change the state. That's what we do when we pay gas. And so that's so powerful. And most of what we see it being used for, the vast majority of transaction volume is like meme coin trading. And it's, in some ways, to me, it's like really sad and discouraging, because you have this extraordinarily powerful economic and computational engine, and it's being used to turn to mint, you know, new millionaires out of like dog with hat or whatever. And it's like it, but so I think that just speaks to this idea, like, it's like, well, what is crypto? Is it the computer or is it the casino? Which one is it? Because we see both. And I actually think that the answer is that it is both. Is that, and if you go too far in one direction, you're actually missing out on the power and the leverage that can be gained from the EVM. So like Nick Tamino from One Confirmation has this framing that he uses, which is purists and tourists. And I think that's another way of thinking about the casino versus the computer. And I think that the purists would say gambling is uninteresting and perhaps morally corrupt, and I reject the casino and am very much a disciple of the computer. And then you have, which would be like right curve, galaxy brain, right? And then the left curve, smooth brain, is like, I just want to get rich. I don't care about all this nerd shit. And they're like pure, like they're like purists, but in a very different way. You know, they don't actually care about anything other than just making money.
They're not confused about their own motivations.
Exactly. And I actually think that the winning products and protocols will embody both. Probably the best example of this, I'd say would be Uniswap. Like Uniswap, I think so far has a foot in each of these things. Like there's real depth of understanding with how the EVM works and what it's very good at doing. And it supports this sort of like degen use case. And so I think like, this is something I think about a lot. And this to me is where, when I talk about pooled capital to achieve shared goals and shared upside, it's the shared upside piece that's, I think, net new. Because if you look at, you know, tools for pooling capital on the internet have been around for a while, but to me, that's only half the story. Like if you go back, way back, like if you look at the founding stories, the founding like stories of Kickstarter, it's like it was always around, hey, let's share together in this thing that we helped create. And I think that's just what people want to do. And crypto helps us do it. And sometimes that looks a little degen. Sometimes that might look speculative in nature, and that's okay. And so to me, like, building crypto is all about like wayfinding and sense making to get into that Goldilocks zone of being like something that's very powerful and like leverages the computer that is the EVM, but at the same time provides real economic opportunity, you know, and like real opportunity for upside. And you want to be both of those things. You have to kind of you have to be in this quantum state. And it's hard for most founders to embrace that. I think most people are like tribal in nature, and we want to be one or the other. You know, we want to make a meme coin trading app that's like ultra degen, or we want to go and make some like galaxy brain, you know, new protocol that like is not about gambling at all. And I think like there's magic in the middle.
Into the Bytecode is sponsored by Privy. One of the biggest problems we're grappling with as builders working on crypto-enabled applications is how to make the right trade-offs between user experience on the one hand and security and privacy on the other hand. How do we promote self-custody and ownership while letting the application shine rather than the crypto behind it? So Privy plays an important role here. They provide simple onboarding so anyone can connect to your app easily by allowing them to sign in with an existing wallet, or by making it easy for you to provision a new self-custodial wallet for them, linking to social logins like Google, Twitter, or Discord. I personally have faith in Privy because of the team. Henry Stern, who's one of the co-founders, was previously on an episode of this podcast, so you can listen to that conversation for more of a deep dive. And he and his partner, Asta Lee, have been thinking about data privacy and security for a long, long time. And you can see this in the level of thought they're putting into the product. So if you're working on a new product and thinking about how to reach a wider group of users without compromising on either user experience or privacy and security, then I encourage you to check out Privy at privy.io. Yeah. I feel like even, even the idea, like even ideas around how, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum grew over time, and that, anyone who held some BTC or ETH was a part of this distributed kind of marketing engine that had just formed bottom up without anyone coordinating it, and how basically these networks can bootstrap themselves off the ground. It's kind of tapping into the same, dynamic, right? Where you're a part of this group. That group is just like much bigger in the case of like Bitcoin or Ethereum. And maybe, it wasn't in the very beginning. And you believe in this shared vision, and together you're helping grow this thing, and you're winning together. And I feel like this is, I feel like some folks who are more deeply rooted in the computer side of the story, like researchers, engineers, like it's easy to miss also what is beautiful about this whole psychological like dynamic that you can get into with other people. There's something, even there's something like I bought this meme coin that's gone around Farcaster a lot, and a couple of my friends have been involved with kind of building it, called Higher, right? Which, we're only going to go higher from here. But the thing that's fun about that is that you're kind of part of this, you're in on this shared secret together, and you're kind of dreaming up how this thing can grow over time. And in the case of Higher, it has like a positive, it has like this techno optimist, we want to improve the world. At least that's the story we kind of tell ourselves. Um, and and it's creative, and through that arc kind of progressing forward, you also make money, and you make money with your friends. You're succeeding together as a group. And there's just something really kind of, it feels like a wholesome thing when you look at it through that lens. But then the dark side of it is that there's also versions of this which are purely kind of fueled by greed, and it's much more short-term oriented, and you're not actually connected with what's going on. And maybe there's this sense of scarcity of like, oh man, like I'm gonna miss out on this thing. And there's both a positive side to these energies and the dark side, and it's like very nuanced how to wield them as a builder who's trying to incorporate them into what you're building.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I think that's well said. And I will give a more pessimistic view on meme tokens. I mean, I am a big fan of Higher, like the culture and the aesthetic and the memes that have come out of Higher. But I think that like all meme coins or scene coins share the same underlying economic model, which is that you need people buying in, and the new money that comes in acts as exit liquidity for the old money. And so it's like dumping, and so I think like I don't know how you get away from that without cash flow. Like fundamentally, like I think you need capital ingress, like otherwise it's like a greater fool's game. And so though I love and I think that the message, the brand, it's very aspirational. I love that there's like these kind of fitness clubs that are emerging. It's all very positive and makes you feel good. And the underlying economic model is like kind of the same as it is with any crappy like greed money grab game as well, which is that you need more money coming in to act as exit liquidity for people who want to sell. So like if I were to look at it very like through like a very pessimistic lens, I'd be like, oh yeah, this is all just like a kumbaya, let's make everybody feel good, let's so that they buy in, and then you dump on them. And so like and this is a big reason why we are thinking about more sustainable economic models as crypto primitives, because I think like for something to be truly sustainable, it needs cash flow. It needs recurring revenue. There needs to be money that's coming in regularly and being distributed. Otherwise, I just don't know how you get out of this. Like, for example, take Hire, and I don't want to pick on Hire. I love Hire, and I hold a lot of it because I got the airdrop for being in the channel.
Yeah. Also to say that obviously this isn't financial advice. I feel like we should say that
obviously,
when there's a real token out there, and these
Yeah.
are, we're just kind of playing around. And for me, at least, it's just to have some fun and to learn in the process. So, not financial advice.
Yes, thank you for the disclaimer. I mean, the other thing that I would say is that in a lot of ways, I think that the token is just an excuse to do these aspirational things. Like I've been inspired. I'm like, oh, I should go on a run, or I should go on a climb, or like,
well,
go lift
I feel
weights or whatever.
Maybe to riff on this, I feel like the DNA of Hire to me feels like close to the DNA of Nouns, in that you're kind of like building this brand, right? You're building a headless brand from the ground up. And in the beginning, there's nothing but the brand. There's just awareness of a meme that's percolating around. But I think that brand itself has some value and can imbue other things with value over time, right? So, I think our mutual friend Salvino, for instance, who built the Noggles, the physical Nouns glasses, that's a physical, like touchable, real world business with cash flows that was only possible because this meme had gotten off the ground, which itself, in its pure form, there's no value to Nouns other, to capture some of the value, you need to sell it to the next person. But I think there's this like ineffable, like intersubjective value that's being created with brands that I think meme coins are maybe tapping into in their positive form.
I agree. I think that's an astute observation. I think they do share a lot of the same qualities. Just to push back a little bit, I would say that the thing that has really constrained Nouns is, again, the economic model, because it's a daily auction. So they actually do have recurring revenue with the auction, but I think it's been insufficient. I think that's why there was the big fork, and I think that's why a few years later, Nouns to me feels very diffused. And maybe that's a good thing, but like if someone were to ask me, like, where do you think Nouns will be in 10 years? Like, I don't know. I think I might have like a pessimistic answer, and it's not because I would bet against the people or the aesthetic or the values. It's because I'm not convinced that the economic model is sustainable. Like, buying a Noun for 15 ETH or 30 ETH or whatever every single day, I just don't see it. I don't see how you get there. Same thing with meme coins, right? Same thing with like a specific token. You've seen there's too much volatility in the system. Maybe over time it stabilizes, but I don't know. I'll stand by what I said. I think that there's a lot of amazing, creative, optimistic people who want to do things and sometimes just find an excuse to do it, whether it's a daily auction for an NFT or whether it's an ERC20 token that they're memeing, into existence. And so I think like that's the scarce resource is hardworking, charismatic, creative people. And I think the challenge is to map those to sustainable economic models. I think that's crypto's in the process now of figuring out, okay, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. I don't know how you've managed to turn me into a meme coin apologist here, but maybe. So I'm curious. Like, it's obvious that there's kind of a wide design space here, and nuances in how to think about these things. So how have you kind of synthesized this into what you're building today with Hypersub? Because I think you're using some of these dynamics, but like you said, like there's the whole thing is anchored to this creator, for instance, and there's potentially cash flows that are going to flow through the system. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's this big open question of like, what are going to be the economic models of Web3? You know, like, how are people going to make money? This was a question that was, it was an open question in Web2, and it, I think, landed on, okay, SaaS businesses, like recurring revenue, that's the thing. That's how we're going to monetize all of this new software that's being built on this new medium. And I don't know, it reminds me in some ways of the Jeff Bezos quote, where he's like, you know, people ask us how the world is going to change in 10 years. And like, though that is an interesting question, we often ask how it's not going to change. And I think for me, when I think about, okay, like sustainable economic models, it's like, well, you need recurring revenue. Every business needs that in order to sustain itself. And so that's I think that's our bias. You know, that's what we believe is going to persist, you know, from Web 2 into Web 3. Now, how we do it and the specific mechanics, I think, are changing and will change even more. But I think the idea that you have kind of top of funnel revenue to fund these interesting experiments and then you could share in the upside, I don't think that's going to change. So yeah, we're using some novel, like we're using NFTs to do this, right? And we have revenue sharing, and we have, you know,
maybe it's worth for folks who aren't familiar, just describing what it is you do also.
Sure. So we built a protocol called Subscription Token Protocol, STP, and put simply, it's a 721 contract with a notion of time. And this is not a new idea. There have been multiple EIPs that have proposed some form of this. And we had the idea, we thought we were geniuses, and then we realized like, oh, nope, actually quite a few people have thought of this before, and it just is an idea that hasn't really gotten off the ground. So we didn't let that discourage us. We just built it, and we built a product really to kind of demonstrate the capabilities of this protocol. So the name of the product is called Hypersub. And the basic idea is that when you mint an NFT on Hypersub, you're minting time. You're not minting tokens, you're minting time. And the way that the time is represented is in the form of seconds, and that's on chain. So for example, when you deploy an NFT on Hypersub, rather than just specifying price per token, you're specifying price per token over time. So when you say, okay, this NFT, it's $10 per month. When I mint 1 month, I'm minting 1 month's worth of seconds, and those seconds are on chain. And so as time passes, my balance of seconds is decremented by 1 every single second until it gets to 0, at which point whatever perks or benefits or access or IRL experiences or discounts or whatever it is have been promised to me will end unless I put more money in. So that's the basic like design of the protocol, how it works. And people have been using this to sell and distribute their writing, podcasts, art, music. People are building membership clubs, group chats. They're doing all sorts of interesting things with this primitive. And the thing that we look at is like, how sustainable is all of this? And so when we see money flowing through these contracts regularly, and that money being used to fund interesting things that are then shared with the members, like that to us is like, okay, this is working. This is a sign of success because it's sustainable. It's going to work over time.
What's an example of that? Like, what are concrete things that have been happening?
There's a few. I'd say there's 4 actually. One is affiliated with Hire. So Jihad from Believe in Something is using Hypersub to fund a grant giving organization. So the money pools in to the Hypersub contract. They then take that money and then they issue grants to people that are publishing their work on chain. Proxy Studio is another one that's using the revenue he's earning on a recurring basis from Hypersub to bootstrap like all kinds of different, projects. They did the first DEX on the DGen L3. He's done a couple different like investment projects and bootstrapped like software. YB from Terminally Onchain is using Hypersub. He also built an app using the funds from his Hypersub. He's bootstrapped a community, does regular mints and competitions, and then the other actually the OG for us is Ted from Farcaster. So she has Club Ted, and she does IRL events, poker games, meetups. She does office hours. She's really like building a community around this primitive. And in all four of those cases, they really are like alive. There's life there, there's activity there, there's new projects being built and refined. And so yeah, like it's small, it's very, very small. It's just we're, I think, at the very beginning of the journey. But the fact that there's something authentic that people really value enough to continue putting money in, I think is what inspires us to keep going. And I don't want to be like a maxi on any of this and say like, this can't also happen with other primitives. It absolutely can. I think just so much of crypto has just been fly by night. Something is huge and everyone's talking about it and it captures the attention and imagination of everybody. And then you fast forward a few months and it's completely dead. And I'm sure each of us just rattle off a list of things that's been true for. And I think that in order for our industry to mature and to get mainstream adoption, we really have to get out of that. I don't think that's healthy. The volatility is good because it's a signal that we're in like a high exploration. Like there's a lot of FAing in order to FO. But I think I don't know. I think that it's been, we talk about how early it is, but I mean, how long has Ethereum been around at this point? I think, so that's something I'm thinking a lot about is how do we build something that a skeptic on the outside can look at and say, okay, this is legit. This is real. This is sustainable. And I'm going to look into this. It's something we think about a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that. So maybe let's dig into this mechanism and what's actually possible here. So maybe for me to rephrase, like the subscription token protocol and Hypersub at the most fundamental layer, it's a subscription protocol, right? You kind of mint tokens per unit of time, and you can use this subscription to represent anything: membership in a community, access to a particular person, a newsletter, anything like that. So maybe kind of putting myself into the shoes of a creator. Let's say I'm starting a new newsletter and my options are to go do this on Substack and charge, some amount of money per month, and or to do this on using Hypersub. So one of the, assuming that the kind of infrastructure works equally well and it's all kind of abstracted away from me and I don't have to deal with extra pain on the crypto side, the kind of couple of things that come to mind as kind of main, trade-offs or kind of questions I would have are, the first one is, in the Substack mode, my subscribers are kind of invisible to the world, right? They're only I know who they are. And in the kind of Web3 mode, they're legible, they can be seen on chain. And this to me feels like a big difference, where maybe on the and maybe there's a parallel to how, traditional web businesses kind of have their closed databases with their proprietary data. And if you kind of instead build more of a protocol, you're building open data, but leaning into an ecosystem of other people who also participate. I feel like maybe there's a parallel here with like how, as a creator, I would think about this. but to me it's like, okay, if I have these people in my newsletter list, I don't have to worry about other creators approaching them. I don't, it's like a lower variance thing. It's just I do a good job with my newsletter, and these people are going to continue subscribing. Whereas when I'm on this side, maybe someone else is starting a newsletter, and now they want to come, they want to come attract the same people that I've worked so hard to build. It's just this like honeypot that I've developed. um or but I think there's also upside here that I think you would describe, in that like other people can drive value to this membership. So I'm curious, how would you kind of, what is the shift in mindset that I need to make to do these subscriptions in a on-chain legible way?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And I would add that in the Web 2 world, it's a highly mediated relationship. I think that Substack basically psyops you into thinking that the subscribers are your subscribers, but they're not. They're Substack's subscribers. They're the ones that decide what you get to see and what you don't see. They're also the ones who handle the payment. And so if you leave Substack, you can only take with you what they let you take. And so that is not the case. Like, and building on chain, like if you think about it again, the EVM is an open computer, it's an open substrate. So whatever you do on chain can be leveraged by any other system that's building on chain. That is not at all the case in Web 2. So everything kind of exists in these little prisons, these little data silos, and they can't be used by anybody else. So take somebody, take a prominent writer, take Barry Weiss, right? She has a very popular Substack. Let's say that she wants to do an IRL event. Let's say that she does a podcast. Let's say that she does things on other parts of the internet. Well, no other parts of the internet can take advantage of the fact that I am a subscriber to hers on Substack. So I show up and I'm just like everybody else. Now, I might be a diehard fan of hers. I might have been a longtime subscriber. I've paid hundreds or thousands of dollars, and it doesn't matter. I'm completely in. I look the same as someone who's never heard of it before, and so that limits the kind of experience that I can have in that little digital walled garden. And that sucks. I think that's worse. Like it's because who I am is it's different between different platforms. There's no common substrate that everyone can take advantage of and say, oh, Jonny, okay, you've been with her from the very beginning. You've been a longtime supporter. Here, let's give you a different experience. Let's offer you something more because of this. Like, I think that's what people want. I think that's what they've earned, but they can't do it because it's all of these silos that are trying to be these like little fiefdoms. And so I think that that's the promise of Web3. That's the promise of building on chain, is that something that you do, in app A can be leveraged by app B to give you a better, richer experience. So I'd say that's like a big advantage. I hate using this word interoperability because it's such a nerd word. And I think that most people it's too abstract and they don't actually care about it. But when you provide an experience that is interoperable, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So an example of this would be like pre-cloud, internet. It was like software came in a box, and the mental model was that you ran the software on the box, like on your computer box. And so you're like, oh, my emails, they're on this box. And if I go to a different box, the emails are not there. And over time, everything shifts to the cloud, the internet. And you like look at your emails on your phone, and then you're like, oh, the emails are not on my like black box. They're here too. Wait, so where are they now? Well, now they're in the cloud. And you're like, oh, okay. There's these light bulb moments that went off in the minds of millions of people when they start looking at Dropbox. right? And like Google Photos and all these things where they're like, oh, that's interoperability, right? There's like, oh, this data can, it's like it can be in many places at once. And so it's like we have yet to achieve that with like experiences, like social experiences and products like on the internet. Like we have it with our own personal files, but we don't yet have it with relationships, the social and economic relationships that we have with the people that we engage with and support across platforms. So I think that's like the mindset shift to me. I think of it as like the universal access pass. It's like an analogy would be if I go to New York City and I buy a subway card and then I get on a plane and go to and go to London, it should work. And when you build on chain, it does work. And that's in real life, it may not, that analogy may not matter because you're like, well, I don't really go to London all that often. But the digital equivalent is that we're jumping between platforms like all day, every day. So why should I have to start from zero?
So maybe like the kind of creator, like if we're talking about Barry Weiss, like rather than just thinking of yourself as a writer, you can kind of start thinking of yourself as more of a like ecosystem builder. Because you go ahead.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like this is what I don't like, is that every platform has an opinion on who you should be and what you should be. So because Substack's perspective is we're a writing platform, they look at everyone as though they're writers. And if you're not a writer, then you don't have a place here. And I just don't think that maps to the three-dimensionality of creative people. Let's look at All In Podcast as another example. It's a podcast, but they also write, and they're also investors, and they also do events. And it's like, I think that's this idea that, you know, you have creators and they're just these like two-dimensional entities that only ever pump out one kind of thing. I don't think that does not now and has never mapped to the reality of being a creative person. And so I think like platforms have to build verticals because you can't build a kitchen sink. You can't be all things to all people. So software wants to verticalize. Software wants to be more two-dimensional. You want to be able to give somebody an elevator pitch and be like, it's the best place to like publish and consume writing on the internet. It's the best place to publish and consume videos on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. That makes sense from a product perspective. It does not at all make sense from the human, you know, creative perspective. And so my thinking is, let creative people be all things. Like let them be what they really want to be and use different platforms for what they're good at. And then let the audience be transient. Let it go with them and put the ownership of that audience, specifically the economic relationship that the creative person has with that audience, in the hands of the creator. They should own that. That should not be mediated. So that's kind of, that's the whole idea with Hypersub.
So you're really building this economic relationship with the audience. This is what you're building. Like if you want to communicate with them via a newsletter, if you want to do a podcast with them, if you want to do events with them, that's not what you're doing. You're kind of like, there's this interface that other products can plug into and they enable this creator to engage with their audience.
You got it. Like one thing I like to say is that Hypersub is a payment rail that kind of LARPs as a creator platform. It's a highly stylized, fun to use, easy to use payment rail. That's really what it is. So when people say, oh, why can't I publish my writing directly in Hypersub? We're like, because we're not a content platform and we're not going to be one. Like you should go use Paragraph, or you should go use Mirror, or you should go and use whatever other platforms are out there or may be out there in the future for publishing writing. And the same is true for videos or for social or for, you know, podcasts, or pick your medium. You know, like really this is just it's an economic tool that you as the creator own. You're literally the owner of this contract, and you can take this with you any place that supports it. That's the power. It's that it's transient. You're not locked in. And this, again, going back to something I said in the beginning of the conversation, let's say that we go bankrupt and we die and Hypersub just disappears. You still own that economic rail. You are the owner of that. You can take that with you. It'll work anywhere that an NFT is supported. And to me, this is like the power and the value proposition of it. But like, this is all very like nerdy, but I think that for people who are really serious about this stuff and who have been screwed by platforms, is actually a super compelling value proposition from the creator's perspective. From the fans' perspective or the consumer's perspective, the fact that we have these kind of built-in revenue sharing models is also very differentiating, because if you look at, say, a supporter on any one of these platforms, you could be early and be very active, and that is not seen. That's not rewarded in any way. But I would argue that it should be, because the people that are supporting early on have an outsized impact on the success of someone's creative work than, say, the nth fans. And so the fact that you can now do this because of, again, like, crypto's really good at programmable value, at moving money around and moving money over time. I think that sort of gets people cut in. It gets people skin in the game in a way that just you can't in Web 2 platforms. So yeah, I guess like this is the mindset shift. Is that I'm going to be who I am, and I want to find tools that enable that rather than change who I am to fit the tool. The dog should wag the tail. The tail should not wag the dog.
Into the Bytecode is sponsored by Optimism. The Optimism Collective is building the open source modular software project known as the OP Stack, which allows developers to run layer 2 blockchains, while also addressing key governance and economic challenges in the wider ecosystem. Optimism is also leading decentralized grants experiments, like retroactive public goods funding, which recently granted 10 million OP to projects across developer tooling, infrastructure, and education. More recently, they had a major milestone by adding Coinbase's blockchain Base to also be governed by Optimism governance, and also contribute a portion of their sequencer revenues back to the collective. I've known the Optimism team for many years and know that they're dedicated to both scaling Ethereum and extending its ability to build better economic structures. So, if you're interested in learning more, whether you want to build something new or you want to apply for grant funding, then I encourage you to check out Optimism at optimism.io.
Mm-hmm. Well said. So I think there's also another angle to this, which is that the first part of it is that I'm not locked in as a creator, right? And I have this economic relationship with my audience boiled down to its absolute like essence, that's then kind of can be plugged into different products and platforms as I wanted to, and the control remains in my hand. And even if the company that initially mediated this relationship disappears, this will remain there. And it's global, it works instantly. It's like, there's a lot of good stuff there. The second part is that, which we haven't talked about as much, which is what I was trying to get at with like being like a creator versus like a creator ecosystem builder. And by that, what I mean is that, let's say Barry Weiss or All In can, with some difficulty, take their audience on one platform and choose to run an event, right? They have to export this list, figure out how to like contact these people, just even make them understand that, okay, I'm a multidimensional creator now. I'm not just this writer, but it's doable. Like the creator themselves can, through some difficulty, engage with their audience in multiple ways. I think the thing that's also fundamentally different in the Web3 sense is that anyone else can also choose to run events for this creator's audience, right? So I could be running some, I could be hosting a conference at my university on some political science theme. And I could be like, hey, if you're a subscriber of Barry Weiss's community, we have this pre-event that you're welcome to come to and meet, XYZ. And this is a very interesting thing, which is it's how it works in the crypto ecosystem, right? Like other people can run communities, can build products that just interoperates with this same kind of social graph on chain. So how does this change things?
This to me represents the frontier. Like everything that we've talked about up to this point really is looking backwards. It's how it's answering the question, how do these primitives support existing use cases in the existing paradigm? And the question you just asked is more forward looking, which is like, what's in the future? What are the new paradigms that are going to emerge? And to me, it's what you've described. And so if you think about this, what everyone wants is more. They want more revenue, more growth, more distribution, more subscribers. And the only means they have by which to achieve that today, I think at scale, is to kind of surf the recommendation algorithms. So let's take our podcast, right? I have a small podcast kind of around the Farcaster ecosystem. And then let's take Into the Bytecode, which is, I would imagine, a bigger podcast with a bigger audience. And then let's say that there's an even bigger podcast that, has an audience size that's 5 or 10x bigger than yours. And you could just keep going, right? Well, it's a really good distribution and acquisition strategy for us to say, well, we have a subscription. It's, $3 a month or $5 a month. And Into the Bytecode has one as well. And so why don't we just offer 20% discount to anybody who's an Into the Bytecode subscriber to become a subscriber for us? We don't need permission to do that. I don't need to ask Sina. We don't need to do a business deal. I could just do this because the data is all on chain. And so we could even go a step further and say, well, these subscribers, are on chain. So we'll just airdrop them a clip of our episode and say, hey, redeem this. Now that can start to look like spam. And indeed, many of the platforms would treat it as such. And I think that's okay. But it can still bubble up. So for example, in Hypersub, we might say, creator Bob is on Hypersub and creator Alice is on Hypersub. And we're going to allow Bob to create a targeted offer for Alice. Or maybe we surface that to Alice and say, do you want this? Do you approve this? Do you want this not to be hidden? Do you want to endorse it? So there's all kinds of stuff like this where you can imagine like collaborations between creators, discounts, etc. One thing I like to say is Hypersub is a network of networks. If you think about each of the creators on Hypersub, they're building a network of supporters. And these networks can interact with each other in all kinds of really interesting ways that are not yet explored. This to me is like what we should be thinking about like in the next year. There's a lot of table stakes stuff that we have to get done. But once that's out, this is where we've been thinking is how do you facilitate the interaction between networks to facilitate growth from the creator and like discovery and a better experience on the part of the consumer. This to me is the really optimistic and like futuristic promise of Web3.
So I think there's a positive side to this and the negative side. The positive side is, which I want to get into, is Costco and how this like membership, driving value to the membership is like a very good mental model here. But maybe before we get there, if I'm a big creator, if I'm all in, why would I want my subscribers to be legible to the world so that every other podcaster can come and like kind of vampire attack my audience and be like, hey, we have something better?
Because it imbues your membership with even more value. If by being a subscriber to Into the Bytecode, I get access, perks, discounts, and better digital and IRL experiences, then that makes me want to be even more loyal. That becomes the entry point into this whole universe of perks. Like an example of this would be like the Farcaster OG NFT. It's like given out at a time when nobody cared, and Farcaster, I would say, was low status. Then what started happening, so Dan did this NFT, and then what started happening is a lot of airdrops and apps started opening up their whitelist, and like everyone was like, oh, well, we'll just kind of orient around this Farcaster OG NFT because it's a really high quality user base. And so then there became a lot of status associated with it, and it drove the price up. And to me, that's just an example of like an organizing unit that was the gateway to like all kinds of other things. And to me, this is like, if you build a genuine community of like real people that are really engaged and really getting value from what you're doing, that's super valuable to other systems that can then start offering more and thus imbuing your community with even more value. I think where it flips into being spam, and to me this is really more of a UX problem than it is a protocol problem, which is you just have a barrage of crap that's getting kind of streamed into your wallet. Everyone's sort of trying to like you say, vampire attack you or distract your attention. But to me, that's really that's not an issue so much with the underlying primitive as it is like, what is the user experience? So what does that feel like when I go to Hypersub? And as long as it doesn't feel shitty, I think you can make it a net positive.
Yeah, I think there's a shift. It makes me think of this blog post that Fred Wilson wrote a couple of weeks ago, which in his characteristic style was very simple, but like hit something really important, which was, I think it was titled Generosity, and how like Web3 founders and protocols have more generosity baked into them. And there's something here, like from the perspective of the creator, if I go this, Web2, I have a one-on-one relationship with the audience that no one else can impinge on. And that's maybe more secure. It's lower variance in a way. But if you kind of like, maybe there's a kind of scarcity abundance mindset shift here, which is that if I instead kind of look at each subscriber or member or patron as an individual who's opted into this community with their own volition and can at any time opt out, and I kind of like think of them as like sovereign individuals in a way, and they're basically choosing to opt into my community, and as long as I continue to do something good here and to create value for them, and they will continue to do that. I don't need to kind of like be afraid of that changing. But now, by kind of making this community legible to the world, everyone else can also start looking to this community as a source of signal, and that this is a good group of people. And now everyone else can come and bootstrap other products, other communities, like give more value to these people. And this is what to me ties to this Costco, drive value to the membership thing, which is like, you don't need to be the person who's driving all of the value to this membership. Like, the broader ecosystem can do that for you.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think that actually maps to reality much more so than what the Web 2 platforms would lead a creator to believe. Like, you don't have lock-in, and people are trying to attract your viewers, your subscribers, your followers away from you all day, every day. And so like it's not your community, like these are just people on the internet. And so the idea that like, they're yours, you own them. No, you don't. And you never have, and you never will. Like, authentic communities are diffused across the internet. And so I think like, showing that and being honest about that is we're closer to reality now. And I think that's a net positive. I think I've been thinking so much about this question, like, is there a difference between, let's call it, say, a Web 2 and a Web 3 creator? And because you asked about this, like, what's the mindset shift? I think it's a really important question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I think one analogy is an observation that Henry Rollins, the singer for the punk band Black Flag, made about the difference between punk and hip hop, which were two movements that emerged at roughly the same time in roughly the same places. And he makes the observation that in punk, if you had success and you made money, that you were rejected as a sellout and you became this pariah. Whereas in hip hop, the opposite happened. If you had success and you made money, you actually got even more status and you were embraced and you were celebrated. And that's ultimately why hip hop ended up inheriting the pop cultural crown, because it didn't eat its own. It celebrated success. And I know that in Web 2, especially for Web 2 creators, how much money they make, how many subscribers they have, it's a little bit of a taboo subject. It's not something that they want to share. In fact, Patreon has this public by default, and the vast majority of creators on Patreon disable it. And I think, whereas in Web3, I think it's kind of the opposite, which is when we are meeting with creators, we go, oh yeah, so-and-so made, $100,000 on Hypersub or whatever. They're like, wow, that's like exciting. And I think there's a kind of embracing and almost celebration of wealth and success in crypto that you see much less of in Web 2. And so initially I was like, oh, maybe that's the difference between the Web 2 creator and the Web 3 creator. But I actually think that there's like a synthesis that I'm starting to form a thesis on, which is that it's actually neither of those things. It's not like gratuitous celebration and flaunting of wealth, nor is it the rejection of wealth. It's the difference between revenue and GDP. So I think that the Web 2 ecosystem is very much about revenue. It's about how much money is coming into the creator. And I think that this emerging frontier of Web 3 creator is like, how much money are we making together? I think that's what we both find so inspiring about the higher community, is that it's like, what are we all doing together? And I think like you've seen this, it's almost like flowers sprouting up through the concrete in the Web 2 ecosystem. Look at somebody like Mr. Beast, huge, mega famous, probably one of the biggest creators in the world. And what does he do? He gives the money away. And that's like his form of entertainment. And I think that there's something here with like Web3 creators. We're seeing this more on Hypersub, which is it's less about me and how much money I'm making, and it's more about what are we doing together? How can we win together? And this brings back to the beginning of the story, right? It's shared upside. It's not my upside. It's what are we doing together? I think this is the big mindset shift from Web 2 to Web 3. It's like, how can we all win together? And maybe me as the creator, I'm kind of the figurehead. I might be at the helm of that. I might be making decisions along those lines, but we're all kind of here together. It's very kumbaya sounding. It's very...
No, but it makes sense. Revenue versus GDP. That's a really good framing. It's also, I mean, even thinking to the few brief experiences I've had with existing Hypersubs, like why Yash is terminally on chain, where people do like he includes mints and airdrops to the subscriber base. And it's this exact dynamic, right? Which is that it's exactly what we're talking about. Other creators have a channel, like a kind of pre-existing, vetted, high signal to noise community of people that they can interface with. Us as subscribers win because we're getting exposed to new and interesting things that we wouldn't otherwise. And Yash wins because everyone's happy. Like he's helping other creators, he's helping his subscribers, and there's a way in which, I mean, it is a rising tide lifts all boats situations, which is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts in a way.
That's right. And it's a very kind of positive and endearing like kumbaya way to think about it, but let me give like a more cynical spin on it. 0x Designer, someone who I am friends with and whose work I think is incredible. He said something on Farcaster a while ago, and it perfectly represented what has been my kind of guiding principle in my career, which is he's like, if you want to get ahead, help people. And so this perspective of let's win together, let's think about GDP, not revenue, it's self-serving. This is, in a lot of ways, this is like capitalism. It's like everyone acting in their own economic self-interest actually is the thing that results in the entire economy rising. So I don't think that there's much different here. It's like the idea that you can take a creator like YB, and he's like, okay, I'm going to work really hard for this community. He's not doing it from purely altruistic intents. He that's the outcome, but it's also leading to his own growth. It's also self-serving. So this to me is like a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's like, it's good that we have now a situation where someone is incentivized to work really hard for other people, and that doing that is how they get success. I think that the people who will be the most successful building in Web3, like creators and community builders, they understand this deeply, either explicitly or tacitly.
Mm-hmm.
It's what 0x Designer said. If you want to get ahead, help others. Like, you can now scale that.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by you can now scale that?
You can build a community of hundreds or thousands of people that you're doing this with.
Right. I really like that. You're dropping some bangers here.
Good. I mean, the pressure's on. I mean, the Into the Bytecode is like the big leagues. So I gotta step up my game.
I don't know about that. Another maybe smaller point, which I found interesting, is this distinction between punk and hip hop, and how in the Web3 context, our revenue numbers are all by default transparent. And I've also noticed this in how you communicate about what's going on with Hypersub. Like, you're very open. I mean, in a way, all the protocol metrics are open on Dune and anyone can go look at them. But you've kind of brought this into how you communicate about what's happening and the progress that's being made. Like, a year ago, we had $0. Today, we have, I don't know what it was, like 700,000?
760,000 creators have earned.
Yeah,
in less than a year. Yeah.
But this, there's an analog to this in the kind of, indie hacker community too, where people are open about their metrics and how much money they're making and stuff. But it's quite a new thing, and it feels like it's coherent with this overall model, where like lean into transparency of what's going on, because people can see it, but you can kind of you can bring it into the central kind of storyline of how this is unfolding.
Yes. I mean, if you think about what it means for a company to go public, the law is saying, look, you need to be more transparent and more forthcoming with information about your company. And it's what's funny to me about the kind of regulatory showdown that's been happening, say, in America with, regulators and crypto companies, is that like we can actually far exceed the standards of reporting because everything is on chain. So regulators should actually be embracing companies that want to build natively on chain, because you can go way past what a typical public company might report. So I think this is just native to the medium. It's just like everything is transparent, everything is open, you can't hide anything, and if you do, people will find out. So why try? I also think that, again, totally self-serving. It gets high engagement. People love it. When you share, when you're honest, people like that. And I think when you're dishonest, people can feel it, and they don't like it. And so it's the great Richard Feynman quote where he's like, it's important not to be fooled, and the easiest person to fool is yourself. I think this is like one of the biggest traps for founders. This is one of the hardest things about being a founder, is that you have to be simultaneously rooted in an optimistic future that very few other people believe will be true, right? Because if they all believed it, you're not actually doing anything interesting. And you have to be rooted in the here and now. And to me, like, being honest about where things are, like when I write my investor memos every month, it's like a sometimes hard and sobering experience, because you're like, these are the numbers. Like, this is the brutal reality that we are living in. And I have to come to terms with that, every day, every week, every month. Like, this is the job. So sometimes it's good and it's favorable and the numbers are exciting because they're big. And sometimes they aren't. But like, I think this is just part of the deal. It's like an athlete looking at their own stats, like that's reality. That's your performance. And you can't lie to yourself about it or try to distort it. You have to be honest about it. So I'm a big fan of Dune. I check our Dune dashboard regularly. Like, that's the standard we hold ourselves to. That's reality.
Have you always been honest in this way, or because it's scary, right? You're being super vulnerable.
Yeah.
And to do that with your investors, but to do that also publicly, to share exactly what's going on with the finances and economics, it's a different way of being in the world.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if I have been. I would guess I have not been. I think it's probably a learned thing, like that I've landed on just over time. Working with people, you have a sense for how honest they're willing to be. Maybe it's come from design. I don't know. Like, one of the humbling experiences that I think product designers will have is they'll work really hard on a design that they think is great, and then maybe you sit in a research, you do some usability testing or some user research, and you find people just get absolutely crushed. They're super confused. It makes no sense. They can't complete the task, and your beautiful, perfect design is clearly broken. And you are the one solely responsible for that outcome. It's your fault. You were not good enough. Your design wasn't good enough. And so you have to fix it. And so this, like, I think having gone through that experience a number of times, at least for me, I started to develop a kind of disassociation from the work itself, and just be like, this is just,
it doesn't necessarily have to reflect on my
it doesn't
self-worth.
reflect on me. Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't reflect on me. It's like, and we're searching here. We're trying to find a way forward. And so you just like, you have this almost dispassionate relationship with reality and with the outcome. I think poker is another teacher in this regard. Like, you can have good decisions that lead to bad outcomes. Sometimes you can basically decouple the decision from the outcome. You have bad decisions, good outcomes, bad decisions, bad outcomes, and then the inverse. And so you just focus on only the thing you control, which is only the decision making. And so I think, I don't know, I don't think I've always been like this. I think it's just come through learning, reading, being around people, experiencing, building things. It's what makes sense to me as a builder. It's how I want to be. It's what I want from other people. Like, someone who I look up to is a little of a strange inspiration, I feel sometimes, but like, I'm a huge fan of Dana White, who's one of the founders and presidents of the UFC. Yeah. And I actually always, even if I miss a fight, I will always watch his press releases after, because he just has this like brutal honesty. And it's very sobering, like the way he talks about the organization, what they did well, what they did not do well, how the performances went. Like, and he's just brutally honest. Like if he'll be like, oh yeah, we completely blew it. And he'll say, here's everything that went wrong. Or he'll be like, yeah, we crushed it. And I think like it's, people appreciate it because there's an authenticity there that a lot of suits and a lot of like people who don't really want to live in reality, they just don't have. They're just like always trying to toe this like positive party line. And I just don't think that works. I think like real people can see right through it. And so, yeah, I'm just trying to operate a company in the way that I want to be, not the way that someone else thinks I should be. And if that means like saying things that are real and maybe not always in the short-term best interest, like I don't care. I think like you just have to be brutally honest. That's how I want to operate. And so it's hard, but I think it's a worthwhile, standard to strive for.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to close on. But man, I really respect and admire you, and I feel like this conversation alone has really the way you're thinking about things to me feels very coherent. The different puzzle pieces definitely fit together. And I think more important than that, I can see that you're really building with soul and with heart. So I'm really excited to see where you go from here.
I really appreciate it, Sina. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed the conversation and appreciate you having me on.
Hey, I'm going to make a small ask here. If you've been listening to these conversations and want to support what we're doing here, I would really, really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review for the podcast wherever you're listening to it. This might seem like a small thing, but it will really help other people also discover the show. Thank you. I'm grateful to be able to do this and look forward to being here together again soon.